Good evening, scholars, and welcome back to the Restricted Collection, a podcast about tabletop games. I'm your host, the head librarian, Chad, and today's episode is a rules PSA for Arkham Horror, the card game. Today's rules PSA stems from the word then. I've been told that I've been applying the word then too stringently since the shift to Chapter 2, but a particular discussion on Reddit caught my eye, and it took me a minute to dig into it and sort it all out. That seems like a great basis for a rules PSA, so here we are. Shout out to Kim Redamai and OKBandicoot9130 on Reddit for the post and response that started all of this. The original discussion was around a Board Game Geek thread about Isabel's signature weakness, Breaking Point. Breaking Point reads, Revelation, take 1 direct damage. Then, if you have 6 or fewer remaining sanity, take a direct damage. Then, if you have 3 or fewer remaining sanity, take a direct damage. Or, more explicitly, for our purposes, think of it more like Step 1, take a direct damage. Step 2, then if you have 6 or fewer remaining sanity, take a direct damage. Step 3, then if you have 3 or fewer remaining sanity, take a direct damage. The BGG discussion was that Bandages has to wait until after Breaking Point fully resolves all of its steps before Bandages itself can trigger. The relevant part of the Chapter 2 Grimoire under Then reads, quote, the post-then aspect of an effect has timing priority over all other indirect consequences of the resolution of the pre-then aspect. For example, if an effect reads, draw an encounter card, then take 1 horror, a player controls an ability that reads, after you draw an encounter card, the post-then take 1 horror aspect occurs before the after you draw an encounter card ability may initiate. End quote. So in the instance of Bandages and Breaking Point, Bandages must wait until all of the then clauses resolve, aka complete all of the steps, before Bandages may heal due to the trigger timing, after an investigator or ally asset at your location takes 1 or more damage. This does mean that Izzy could die from all of this damage, even though they are separate and distinct instances, simply because Bandages hasn't had a chance to heal her. That said, since Bandages does not exhaust, it is able to heal all 3 damage once Breaking Point is done resolving, because they are separate instances that Bandages can react to. The moral is, after triggers must wait until, well, after all of the then clauses. Cool? Cool. Let's get weirder. The Reddit thread built upon the BGG thread by asking how Idol of Xanatos would operate. The Idol of Xanatos reads, reaction. When you are dealt damage and or horror, exhaust Idol of Xanatos and discard up to 3 cards from your hand. Cancel that much damage / horror. This is important and relevant because it is not an after trigger, but a when trigger. The question posed was whether Izzy could discard multiple cards to cancel multiple damage since it's a single card, just split over, but the effect is being split over multiple instances. The answer is no. I'll just say that right at the top here. The answer is no, but for a really weird reason that relates to then clauses. However, before I dig into those weird reasons and the then clauses, I do want to explore some hypothetical variants of Breaking Point to show how at least I understand how similar effects would interact if similar effects were to be put up against this as a test. Just without the then clauses and how then clauses mess things up. So for the first non-then variant, let's assume that the card added the damage together. Something along the lines of Revelation, take a direct damage. If you have 6 or fewer remaining sanity, take an additional direct damage. If you have 3 or fewer remaining sanity, take 1 additional direct damage. Idol of Xanatos should be able to cancel all 3 damage in this instance, assuming Izzy was low enough to trigger all the additional damage triggers. Since it's additional damage, it would be added to the first instance and would be a single instance of damage, so from 1 to 3, which then Izzy could exhaust Idol of Xanatos, discard the appropriate number of cards, and be fine. Huzzah! The second non-then variant I want to explore is one where we keep the card as three separate instances of damage, but without the then clause. So something along the lines of Revelation, take a direct damage. If you have 6 or fewer remaining sanity, take a direct damage. If you have 3 or fewer remaining sanity, take a direct damage. It's basically Breaking Point without the then clauses, but the assumption in my mind is that these are still 3 separate instances. In this instance, the Idol Xanatos would exhaust after whichever instance Izzy wanted to cancel, let's say the first one, because that makes sense, but would not be able to prevent subsequent damage from hitting her, barring any shenanigans that ready Idol of Xanatos, because she would have to be able to re-exhaust on a subsequent instance the Idol of Xanatos to do the discard and cancel effect. Okay, so let's take a look at these weird then clauses. So how does Idol of Xanatos interact with Breaking Point? Because of the then clauses, Idol of Xanatos can cancel the first damage, step 1 if you will, and completely prevent the then clauses from resolving, thus preventing steps 2 and 3, the subsequent checks, from even occurring. This is because, again from the Grimoire, bullet point number 1, if the pre-then aspect of an effect does successfully resolve in full, the post-then aspect of the effect must also resolve. Okay, so pre-then aspect resolves, successfully resolves, post-then must then resolve. Great. Point number 2, if the pre-then aspect of an effect does not successfully resolve in full, the post-then aspect does not resolve. So if it resolves in full, subsequent thing must, the then statements must resolve. If the pre-then aspect does not successfully resolve in full, none of the post-then aspects resolve. Okay, that makes sense. So why does this work? Canceling the damage through effects like Idol of Xanatos prevents the pre-then aspect of the effect from successfully resolving in full, and thus the post-then aspect will not resolve. From the section on cancel, some card abilities can cancel other card or game effects. Cancel abilities interrupt the initiation of an effect and prevent the effect from initiating. If an effect is cancelled, it is considered not to have happened for the purposes of card abilities. For example, if all damage from a certain game effect is cancelled, that investigator is not considered to have taken damage for the purposes of a card effect, such as the reaction ability on Jim Culver. So because canceling something causes it to be considered not to have happened, the step 1, if you will, of Breaking Point cannot resolve, and thus the then clauses that make up steps 2 and 3 do not resolve. It is important to note that this does not work when you ignore the effect. If Izzy ignored the damage from step 1 via a card like Deny Existence, the effect still triggers, but it's just simply ignored. From the section on Ignore, which I will note is new to Chapter 2, and I'm very happy to see it there, some card abilities can ignore the costs or effects of other abilities or game actions. Ignore abilities prevent one or more of a card, token, or ability's effects without interfering with other non-ignored effects or canceling the ability's initiation. Ignoring it does not stop it from resolving. Also from the section on Ignore, if an effect is ignored, it is considered not to have resolved for the purposes of card abilities. However, the corresponding ability or game action was still initiated, and thus other abilities can still react to it. For example, while a cancelled chaos token is considered to have never been drawn in the first place, an ignored chaos token was still drawn, but neither its modifier nor any of its effects will resolve or be applied to the current test or ability. So ignoring it still happened, you just ignore it. You just don't deal with it. That specific piece of the pie didn't exist, but everything else about the pie is still fine. So in the instance of ignoring, the effect is initiated and resolved, but for Breaking Point, the instance of taking 1 damage, that damage is ignored. But since all the ignoring did was ignore that specific aspect of the effect, the rest of the effect moves forward without any interference. Because of this, ignoring does not have the same sequence stopping power as canceling when it comes to then clauses. All right, so that was nitty-gritty Arkham for 10 minutes. What are the takeaways? First, as long as the pre-then aspect fully resolves, then all post-then aspects will resolve. Canceling interrupts this process, and ignoring does not. Second, after triggers must wait until after all then clauses. When triggers can interrupt then clauses. Third, and perhaps most tangentially, there is now clarification on the difference between canceling and ignoring chaos tokens. As I read above, while a canceled chaos token is considered to have never been drawn in the first place, an ignored chaos token was still drawn. So I know this was a point of contention in Chapter 1 of like, oh, what's the difference between canceling and ignoring? When was it revealed? Is it considered revealed if it was ignored? Yada, yada. This just fixed all of that. And I'm very happy about that. And with that, we're going to put this back in the collection. Too long out, and then we'll start getting then clauses. I've been your host, the head librarian, Chad. If you have anything you want to get in contact with me about, feel free to reach out to me at therestrictedcollection@gmail.com. Otherwise, you can find me around as head librarian Chad on Reddit and Discord. Thanks for listening.